heavy teaching load and all that stuff, but I was always kind of seeking administrative type opportunities, doing different stuff like that. And that led to getting into the chair position. And so now as the chair, I just kind of help run the department, doing schedules, hiring people, dealing with student complaints, all while still keeping a teaching load, definitely a much smaller teaching load than when I was just a faculty member. But yeah, that's pretty much where I am now and kind of how I got here.
Thank you.
Great. So hello, everybody. I am Chrystal Starbird. I'm a new assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics. I run a research lab that is interested in studying receptor tyrosine kinases. In terms of like a brief overview of sort of my path, I think in many ways I had sort of a non-traditional path to science in terms of the fact that I had a lot of interruptions, if you will. I went to 2 colleges, including a community college, before I transferred to UNC. So I actually did my undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill, and so now I'm back. After that, I worked for several years. I worked in numerous labs. I worked at Pfizer, a pharmaceutical company. And that's, I think, where I realized, although I had an amazing experience there and it was an exciting environment to work in, that I really wanted to be an academic PI. I wanted to lead my own research lab. And so I went back to UNC as a prep scholar, spent a year doing research, and then I applied to graduate school. I went to graduate school at Vanderbilt, did a postdoc at Yale, and now I'm here back at UNC, as I mentioned, as an assistant professor.
Thank you. A little bit of everything. Tiffany?
Hey, Tiffany Oliver. I am a geneticist by training. I currently serve as recently promoted, announced yesterday, full professor of biology at Spelman College, which is a historically Black women's college in Atlanta, Georgia. As it pertains to my path to science, I think it was pretty direct and traditional, if I may. I went to an HBCU, so I went to Tennessee State University for undergrad. One of the best decisions I never made. I'll tell you about that later if you're interested. And from there, while I was there, I did research with undergrads. I was in the MARC program and studied abroad and did research abroad and love science. And so I went straight from undergrad to a PhD program in genetics at Emory. So I was in their genetics and molecular biology program at Emory University in Atlanta. I postdoced in human genetics at Emory, but I did this NIH-funded postdoc. It's called the FIRST program, but it's one of the ARACTA programs, which allows postdocs to actually teach and do research at the same time, because they've already identified an interest in a scientific career that involves teaching. And so I did that, and I was able, after my 3-year postdoc, got right into my faculty position at Spelman. This is my 13th year at Spelman College. I was chair of the Department of Biology, and I am currently on sabbatical, which means it's the non-traditional word of sabbat, but for academics, that means it's time away from your teaching and research and daily duties to actually just focus on your science or your scholarly pursuits. And I'm actually currently a Jefferson Science Fellow in the Office of Global Food Security at the U.S. State Department. And in that capacity, I serve as an advisor, sitting at the intersection of science and policy, which is a new intersection for me. And that's been my path so far. I'll turn it back to you, Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you all for that brief introduction about yourselves and kind of, your journey, right, through getting where you are now. So I think the first question, you touch a little bit on, your responsibilities and what you do, but we want to dive a little bit more into the specifics. What does your day-to-day work look like, right? Like if you were to look at your to-do list this week, what would I say that you can share with us? And I'm going to let, whoever wants to start, you can jump in.
So I'm happy to go first, only because I just submitted a grant yesterday. So I think my day-to-day life is very at the forefront of my mind right now. No, the majority of my time as a new PI is spent, advising people in the lab, whether it's having one-on-one meetings or whether I'm in the lab trying to show them a technique or talk through an experiment together. But a lot of my time is spent writing grants. A lot of my time is spent writing papers and dealing with, having papers come back and having to do revisions and that kind of thing. A lot of my time is spent advising students outside of the lab. So things like being on thesis committees and that sort of thing. And then, of course, because, service is really important to me, a lot of my time is spent sort of in different service duties that I choose. So different committees that I'm on, different boards that I'm on outside of the university as well. So I think that's, primarily the majority of my time.
Thank you. Congrats on, just like getting that grant in.
Thank you. It was work.
I'm sure. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. So my day-to-day kind of changes based on the time of the year. So the spring semester is just wrapping up. So my to-do list for this week is largely just to make sure that the TAs have finished grading everything and making sure that we have all the grades in, and then also figuring out the TAs for the fall semester. We start, we hire them at least one semester ahead of time. In the spring, it's a little bit weird because we hire them now, but they don't come back until like September, August. During the semester, if I'm teaching lecture, then I'll be, making sure that I prepare for that, and then we'll have lecture. Most of my time during the semester is spent making sure the TAs are on task, answering any questions they have about lab issues or grading issues, and then addressing, student problems, giving them makeup assignments, making sure their accommodations are in place, things like that. In the summer is when I spend most of my time developing new lab exercises, updating things, coming up with new assignments and activities and stuff like that, and updating all of the course content.
Thank you. George?
So for me, I don't have research or anything like that. So most of my time as chair, I've got a little bit of teaching each day, or about half of the week I've got some teaching. I'll be holding some office hours at some point where I'm trying to cram in getting some extra stuff done if I don't have students come visit. We've also got committee commitments and things like that. It doesn't keep me busy on a daily basis, but probably throughout the month, I've spent several hours throughout the month working on something for some committee. And then really, I have to admit, I am surprised at how much I email every day. It is just so much emailing, so many people all the time. And that even started a little bit before I started serving as chair. But of course, that has increased quite a bit now that I do chair. So now that I'm chair, when I was just a faculty member, it was a little bit more teaching sort of stuff. But otherwise now it's just kind of swapped out the administrative work for the teaching work.
I hear you with the emailing. Tiffany?
For me, every day is different. I was a chair, and but as a chair, mine's a little different than George's because I'm still doing research, right? I still have grants that are scientific research grants and programmatic grants, right? So I had student activities that I was facilitating for my grants, as well as running my own research lab and teaching and being a chair and kind of doing that administrative work. And so what helped me was every day when I made my to-do list, and I went back and forth between that being written down and that being in like OneNote. We could talk about that another time if you like. But I would always divide everything into teaching, research, and service, because those are the three areas for tenure and promotion. And I would write down everything that I had to do and put them in those categories. And then after categorizing those things, I would then prioritize them. And I would rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, and then complete them in that order. Like that is technically and specifically how I would plan my day. But, some days require more teaching than research. Some days I did more research than teaching, and some days were more service than teaching. For me, I'm at a liberal arts college. It's not a research one. It's different than community college. They're just different. Another time that is very important for me for my science is actually during the summer. And so in addition to during the school year, the summer is a time for me to do my.
Thank you. And just to let you know, Tiffany, you are cutting off a little bit. I mean, we can still hear mostly, but just being aware that the internet is cutting off a bit. Thank you. So it seems you all have, wear different hats, right? And have slightly some, depending on your institution, different roles. But can you talk about what are some of the formal and informal skills that help you reach and succeed in this role?
I'll give it a go.
Yes, of course.
In terms of formal stuff, of course, my PhD was, a big part of that, but it really, taking that PFF class, like it really was very helpful in that it introduced me into like learning about pedagogy, which is not anything that I had done before. So that was really interesting, and also it helped me get the job that I have. So that in terms of formal stuff, that's what really helped me the most. And then in terms of informal, when I would or thinking about when you're in graduate school, like maybe stepping up to serve on committees, or if there's like a government association or things like that, starting to gain maybe skills that show that you could do some administrative work if you're thinking of maybe moving into community college administration or anything like that. So, try to seek out, or I tried to seek out those opportunities as I could, just to gain the experience and then just learn more about how the college works, or, both at when I was a graduate student, and then I kind of did that stuff when I was a faculty member, which helped me become chair eventually. So I think that sort of stuff really helped a lot. And something that is helping me a lot more in the chair role now is thinking a lot more about emotional intelligence and things like that. That has, particularly since the pandemic, that has been something that I have thought a whole lot more about maybe than I did before the pandemic, and kind of coming at problems a little bit differently than I might have before. So that working on my emotional intelligence, I think, is kind of an informal skill that I think is definitely helping me be a little more successful.
Thank you for that. It's really, really important skill. Chrystal.
So I'm starting to think that there aren't any skills you don't need for this job. No, but seriously, being, I think, a faculty member in various environments requires a lot of different skills that you developed throughout your career as a graduate student, as a postdoc, if you did that kind of thing. I think some of the important formal skills for my career are things like, being a good writer, being a good editor. So you have to work on, you have to have good communication skills. Also, you have to, be able to plan sort of at the higher level, some experiments, a program, things that, the vision for your lab, you have to be able to define it. You have to have leadership skills. You have to have mentoring skills to work with people in the lab. But I think in terms of some more informal skills, that I think are really important, I think networking is an important skill that is sometimes overlooked. And I have to say, oftentimes, in all honesty, when I was a graduate student, I heard that word, I think I cringed a little. But you don't realize that a lot of the stuff that we do naturally in science is networking. When you're teaching students or interacting with students, when you're a student interacting with a professor, that's networking. When you're at a conference, at a poster, that's networking. So it's not just, when you're sitting across somebody in a speed dating type of environment, but it's just all those interactions and what you take away from them and how you foster the relationships that, come from those interactions. And then I'd say the other thing is that the other thing that sort of, I think, is informal that others might not touch on or commonly think of, is that you have to be able to inspire people. And that's about getting them to see your vision, right? Because ultimately you're going to have people in your lab, you're going to have people reviewing your grants, reviewing your papers, and you have to have them believe and be able to see your vision. And I think that that's a skill that's sort of not really mentioned, that's really important in this field as well.
Thank you. Yeah, your passion coming, out through everyone.
I'd just like to add to that soft skills, a few more, in addition to those that you mentioned. Patience and grace are things that you have to offer as well as receive. So.
Yeah, I second what Tiffany just said. I feel like in this position, I have a more of a management role, and I manage groups of people, and they always change every semester. And patience and grace is something, that started to just need that more and more. Yeah.
Thank you. So I know, some of you mentioned about the pedagogy, training and teaching courses. So, I think trainees and students ask themselves, if I went, let's say for a postdoc, if I went to an undergrad, a grad school that didn't have that opportunity to teach, right? Like, where could they find those opportunities, and how important it is to have that pedagogy training and teaching experience if where they are right now, they don't have that accessible?
I will say one of the things that really helped me when I was in graduate school was not just the TA experience, but kind of reaching out to people and doing guest lectures. And I wasn't necessarily interested in teaching when I was in graduate school, but initially somebody asked if I wanted to do a guest lecture, and I really enjoyed it. So then I did that every semester when I was in graduate school, and reached out to some other instructors to see if I could come in and give a guest lecture on a topic that was related to my graduate work. So I would say just reaching out to people and see if, they'll allow you to come and do a little lecture. And people have asked me, and I've been more than happy. And, we typically meet ahead of time to make sure that we talk about the level of the students, and so that it stays in the general format of the course. But that would be one way to kind of build some of that experience.
That was similar to what I was thinking, was getting those one-off lecture sorts of experiences. I think those are great to start getting your feet wet with teaching. But I think if you really want to know what it's like to teach a class, it would be a good idea to maybe start thinking about reaching out to a local community college or four-year school and seeing if they have adjunct opportunities, because you're really not going to know what it's like to teach an entire class until you do it. Just one or two one-off lectures is fun and it's great and you get some cool questions, but actually running a class is not the same. There's a lot of great moments like that, but there's like it's not all wonderful. It's not as all great as when you do those one-off lectures. So if you could somehow make a connection at one of those institutions, like I said, I took the PFF class, and that led to a connection with somebody here at Oklahoma City Community College. And I lucked out on that. So, like Chrystal was saying, networking, I am like her. I wrote it down in my notes to add, and I rolled my eyes as I wrote it because I felt the same way. But I realize it's true, like making those connections, they really do help. So if you can make a connection or an inroad somewhere at a school like that, do it. And then also I will mention, at least at my school, like we are fine with giving people their first chance, based on their background and looking like they're,
Right.
Well organized and stuff. But, community college might be a good place to seek for getting that first experience teaching.
As a grad student, I asked my research advisor if I could teach one day a week. And I actually reached out, so I was in Atlanta, to Atlanta Public High Schools, science departments. And somebody said, yes, that was the best preparation for teaching anybody, was high school, for somebody that wanted to teach college, because they don't care. They did not care about my feelings. They were very honest. They were very raw. They were just, it was humbling, but very, very informative, and it wasn't that bad because I'm still here. So.
Yeah. And also learning how to, share the material and break down the context for them. So that's another important skill. Any last comment? I think I got. So thank you for, I think you mentioned like networking, right? And how people think about networking and it's just like, oh, I'm scared, like I'm very introverted, but networking is for everyone and they can learn how important it is for this career and learning more about the field and getting your feet in it. Chrystal, you wanted to add something? No, you're good. Okay. So now I think another very important question that many of them are asking, you hear about how stressful it can be in higher education, and all the roles and responsibilities that you have. So thinking about our well-being, right? How does your work-life balance look currently? Like, what would you tell students and trainees who are thinking about, this career path, but might be, a little bit hesitant in terms of like the workload, the stress, the uncertainty? I mean, what will you tell them based on your experience?
I mean, I guess I can start. I mean, I would say, most of these careers are demanding, but they're also extremely rewarding. And I think, so I have 3 children. So I don't know if I ever feel like I actually obtain balance, but there are a few things I think I've learned sort of along the way in this sort of, demanding career. And those are, that I sort of check in with myself routinely. Am I still excited? Am I still doing things that I want to be doing? Am I okay? Do I need a break? And I'm also aware of the signs, for myself. And so I think like growing in that awareness is important if you're sort of younger, that, I might need a break. And I listen to them. That's the important part. Like, everybody, we're all human. Everybody needs a break from time to time. And if for you know what those signs are. For me, I start saying all the wrong words. I do all these kinds of things, and that lets me know that my brain needs a rest. And so I listen to it, and I'm like, okay, this stuff can wait. This is, demanding, but I can put these things down. And so I think there's that aspect of it, which is just checking in with yourself and being honest with yourself about where you are and making sure that you're still, excited. But then there's also scheduling things, right? Because I think several of us in these types of fields can be really guilty of just working and not really sort of stopping. And so sometimes things are intentional. And so I actually have some breaks worked into my schedule. I have, I always take one day on the weekend. I mean, there's probably been a few times I broke the rules, but generally speaking, I always take one day on the weekend where I do not do work at all. I devote that time entirely to my family, to things that I want to do, things that inspire me, things that I'm interested in. And that's been consistent, since I was a graduate student with 3 children. And so I think, making sure that you're intentional about breaks, making sure you check in with yourself, are the best things that work for me. But I'm interested to see what others think.
I can add to that. I feel like setting boundaries for, you're not gonna look at your email after like 10 p.m. or something like that, and not feeling guilty about it afterwards. I think that was something that I had to kind of learn and develop is, setting boundaries is okay and not feeling guilty because you got an email that you didn't get to until the following day, or, there was a problem that you weren't able to address until later on in the day because you were dealing with other things. Learning that was important.
I have 2 core principles that I always, or that I refer to the most, which are transparency and humility. And if I can have those 2 things, it makes it easy for me to navigate academia as myself. With that being said, sometimes you do bite off more than you can chew. And I've had to be humble enough and transparent enough to tell people, like, I have overcommitted. I'm so sorry. I need to back away from this particular project. And it's not often, right? So it's not like I'm a complete flake or anything like that when I join committees or do committee work. But, I can think in like the last year, I've done it once and I have a variety of commitments as a faculty member. So sometimes you just have to do that as well.
That's a skill, learning how to say no, and that's part of the boundaries, right? George, you have anything to add?
I think I could not say anything more eloquently than these three ladies, but I will just say a lot of what they're saying is resonating a lot with me in terms of knowing when to step back when you need to. It's really easy when you come on to want to take on a whole bunch and I can do it all and I want to show that I can do all this. And if you can do it, that's great, but it's going to be hard to keep that pace up. And then sometimes it might be a situation where it is just more than you can do. And I have very recently just started trying to do more of the letting people know that I need a little bit of distance or space or help and stuff like that. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your honesty, because I think they really need to hear that, right? We're always chop mode, like working, and we forget that even resting is part of taking care of yourself. That is not like you're wasting time, like I've been guilty of, or heard from our trainees and students. So this is a great advice, like boundaries, learning how to say no, and stepping back when you have to.
I was just going to say one more thing in terms of feel guilty, which I totally can resonate with. I've realized, sort of in this new role, and I've gotten a lot of advice from people to remind me that when you're not taking care of it's that old thing, when you're not taking care of, you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. But this is really true when you're leading students or mentoring, teaching students or mentoring people in a lab or running a department. All of those things, people need you at your best. And if you're not able to show up at your best, then that's not what they're getting from you. They're not getting your best effort. And so I try to realize that this is me actually doing what I committed to my students, is taking care of myself so that I can then give them the very best of myself as a mentor, as a guide, that kind of thing. So sometimes if you kind of shift your perspective on why you're taking that time off and what it means to your ability, to function, that can be helpful.
Thank you. Now, changing a little bit to how do you choose the type of institutions you want to work at? So some of the trainees ask, how do you weigh the values of different institutions, or one that aligns with yours? How do you make that choice?
I guess I can start again. What you just said is exactly it to me. Does it align with your values? I think that's the hard part, is figuring out like what your talents are, what your values are, what you really want to be doing day in and day out as you go into your career. And once you figure that out, I think usually then picking an institution or a type of institution becomes a little bit clearer. Some people really want to be teaching. They really want that interaction with students. And so they need to go to a place where they're going to be primarily teaching, right? I really am excited about my science and I really want to like answer the next question. And I love the idea of like working with a team that's going to help me to try to answer these questions. And so I kind of knew after, my personal experiences that I think that that's where my strengths lie and that's where I need to be. And, I think ultimately the decision is very, very unique to you as an individual. And the hard part is to try to engage in activities that allow you to answer those questions for yourself.
I knew that I wanted to teach. I know I wanted to do research, and I know I wanted to see more Black women and minority students in STEM. And so I had to go to a place that would allow me to do that. And, so that's why I picked an HBCU, and I was lucky to, choose a women's college, and that women's college choose me back. Right. But I also want to say that, don't be afraid. Like, you can redream. You can try research one and get there and say, no, I don't like this. Maybe I want to try industry. Maybe I want to transition into a teaching institution. Like, there's an eraser on this pencil that we're writing with. So don't feel like you're going to make a mistake.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I was just for me in terms of how I ended up at the community college it was not necessarily intentional. It was just, I mentioned the connection I had through the Preparing Future Faculty. But once I got here and I started understanding the mission of the community college, that's kind of what helped me want to be at a place like that. So, helping people gain access to education that might be out of their reach, just that whole kind of the idea behind that, I kind of fell in love with, and that's why I ended up wanting to stay here. And I haven't really looked outside of the community college because I do really like that aspect of the mission of what the community college is actually doing in higher education.
Thank you. Now, switching a little bit on the populations that you serve, can you each talk about the challenges that are particular to the group of students that you serve?
I'll go first. Oh, do you want to go first?
No, you can go
You can
ahead.
go ahead,
Oh.
George, please.
So I would say at the community college, the biggest hurdle is life for our students. And I know it's probably not at the community college only, but we tend to think of non-traditional students, there being a little bit more non-traditional students at community college. So they're dealing with, a broke down car and like 3 kids and having to go to daycare and pick one up here and, meeting this obligation and that one. And so it's just, sometimes students don't get, they think, oh, I've got these 2 hours on Monday and Wednesday, I can do that class. And they're not thinking, I've got all these other things going on. I have to spend time on that class outside of those few hours, so that's sometimes the hardest thing. And then in particular, lately, post-pandemic, it does seem that students are coming in much less prepared than they had been before. So now we're trying to figure out how to handle remediation in our classes. So for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, remediation is like a 0-level college class or like a pre-college class that you would take before you could take like intro bio or something like that, just to get you to the college level. So we're having now in Oklahoma, they have taken away all of those. You cannot have those anymore and expect students to pay tuition for them. So we have to figure out a way to integrate it now into our courses along with all the content that we have to get to the students. So that's a really big challenge that we're starting to try to get a handle on.
All right.
So because the course that I teach is an introductory course, and it's not just for biology majors. We get lots of anybody who essentially is interested in a Bachelor of Science will take the course. So we get lots of non-majors and majors, typically freshmen and sophomore, but we have a fair number of freshman students. And like George pointed out, a lot of students coming in now don't quite seem as prepared to deal with college life. It seems like there's a lot of struggles with time management and the ability to complete things within a deadline. Attending class is a little bit of a challenge as well. So making sure that we are able to provide accommodations, but also kind of keep them on track. And, there's a sort of finding a balance between making sure that they're able to complete everything and also being a little bit more understanding and accommodating to the things that they're struggling with has been a little bit of a challenge.
And I think for me, I work with a lot of graduate students, and in graduate school, you're supposed to be developing independence, working towards that PhD that says that you're an expert in a field. Developing independence looks like a lot of failure in reality. It looks like a lot of things that you try that go wrong. You learn from those things and then you try again. And that's how you over time develop the problem solving skills that you need in the independence. So I think as a mentor, the hardest part is to make sure that students retain their confidence while they're developing independence. I think graduate school can be really hard for many, many reasons on different people. And I think one of the things that I struggle with is making sure that they get the criticism that they need constructively, that they're developing the independence, that they're allowed to fail, and being supported in that. But at the same time, they're not feeling like I'm a failure, right? That's where you never want a graduate student to be. And I think that for me as a mentor is the thing that I'm the most protective of, is ensuring that they are able to, build that independence while keeping their confidence.
I think that people's unconscious bias. So if I'm just talking about me, right? Just as a Black woman that is a scientist, I think unconscious bias is an issue sometimes, in people's minds. There is a place where you can't exist. And they can't see you outside of that space. And that can be very difficult. There can be, just mentorship sometimes can be difficult. More than mentorship, sponsorship. The difference between the two, they are not the same, but sponsorship is something that I think is more challenging for minority students, minority people, faculty, staff, postdoc, whoever you are, mentorship is usually a little bit more, a little easier. So.
Thank you for sharing that the challenges, right, that you face with your population. Now, on the other side, what excites you the most about your job? What is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
Oh, I think for me, definitely it's the mentoring aspect and getting to work with the students and getting to see, I mentioned that research is a lot of failure, but occasionally there's success. And that is the most exciting time in seeing somebody who's, had a question, struggled through it, answered the question, be able to then write it up, be excited to share the results, I think is one of the most rewarding things that I keep coming back for. Yeah.
Of course, like the aha moments when students like figure it out, and it's great to feel like you're kind of part of them figuring that out. But I have, when you're actually see the students over time, it's nice to just see how they develop kind of as students. And then also, when you hear they're getting into their programs here and there, that's really rewarding to know that like you're part of something that are helping them get their lives improved or whatnot. So that helps a lot, or that's one of the things that I really like. And then also I kind of like helping people solve problems if I can. So connecting a person with a solution is a lot of what the chair role involves. So that is part of what I really like about the chair position.
One non-conventional thing, and something that I didn't think about upon entering science and academia, is travel. Like right now, I'm in Santiago, Chile, directing study abroad. I did study abroad in college in Helsinki, Finland. I travel for conferences internationally, domestically. That was a really nice surprise. And another part of my job that I really like is that I kind of get to make it what I want, right? Outside of the requirements, I can focus more on teaching or research or service. And that's a personal decision that's driven by my passion. And I think that's a privilege.
Thank you. Something that they need to to ask about travel. If that's something they want to do.
I guess I can add a lot of my job. There seems to be a lot of problem solving. So often I'll get feedback from TAs or students that says, this is not working, or this activity is something students really struggle with. And I spend a fair amount of time to kind of modify it and fit it for, a course that has 800 students. And it's the most rewarding aspect is when I hear from TAs like, oh, like they did it and it like they got this, or you implemented this thing and it worked really well. So, just hearing that one of the solutions actually kind of worked and it works and students benefited from it is rewarding.
Thank you. That's what when we work with, a lot of trainees are at the younger level. Well, and we have like grad students and postdoc, but just listening about their successes and helping them kind of figure out things. It's one of the most exciting things of our job here. Now I think it's a question that everyone is asking. It's salary, right? What is the expected range of starting salary in this career path? And what would be that range after that they could get to after more years of experience?
I can get started. So if you're running a research lab, I'm in a School of Medicine department at an R1. The range, even then, in that small category is really wide. I think it typically ranges, I'm thinking about just my knowledge, somewhere around $100,000 up to starting assistant professor up to around $250,000. Although that's typically people starting on the West Coast, where the cost of living is quite different.
Higher.
And so it depends on things like that. And then I think at each level in jobs, there's different incentive structures at each level, though. If you go from assistant to associate, so that's when you have tenure, there's usually a salary jump. And then when you get to full professor, if you do, there's a salary jump. If you take on additional leadership roles, a chair, someday maybe a dean or something, then obviously there's a salary change as well. And I think, the salaries, I think typically for a professor, somewhere between $200,000 and $350,000 for a full professor. But that's, again, in a very small world of research, really, when it comes down to it, in terms of salaries. There are many other institutions and there are other people on the panel that can tell you sort of the salary ranges there, for sure.
Yeah, I am not on the coasts. So this is going to sound very paltry after hearing that. When I started, it was around mid-40s, and now it's upper mid-50s for a new faculty member, at least in a kind of community college here in Oklahoma City. Now we're maybe mid-60s with some years. We are very dependent on state budgets, and they're not always very friendly. So, I've worked at my institution for 14 years now, and for probably over half of them, we haven't had raises. So, and that's just all based on the way the budget works and all that other stuff. So, yeah, you don't teach at a community college and expect to be raking it in or anything like that. It's definitely something that you do because you like to do. But it's not on the higher end of pay scales for careers that you get with your PhD in the sciences and whatnot.
I just want to direct you all to the Chronicle of Higher Education, and you can type in faculty salaries. Chrystal is at a research institution, and she has a 12-month salary. I want you to know that my contract is a 9-month salary paid over 12 months, right? So I actually get quote unquote summers off, even though I, still do research and things like that with external funding. But the salary that I get is 9 months, is a 9-month salary. So just keep that in mind. The Chronicle of Higher Education is going to go by type of institution: liberal arts, state college, research one, community college. And to my experience, it is a very fair assessment.
Yeah, I should add that at University of Maryland, most lecturers are essentially, faculty members who only do teaching, so I don't do any research. I'm one of the very few lecturers who is a 12-month appointment, and that's because I coordinate a lab and we spend most of the summers essentially prepping and developing new labs and things like that. But if you are a lecturer who primarily teaches lecture courses or does a lab that doesn't require prep, then you're a 9 or 10-month appointment. So essentially you have, summers off. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And for those of you attending in the chat, our staff posted the links where you can find about that. So thank you for sharing that resource. And In terms of, oh, Chrystal, you want to add
Sorry,
something?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add. I just wanted to say real quick, like there's some things to consider, many things to consider. So please educate yourself. Like, for example, I pay most of my salary, like as I become more senior, right? So there are things like if you're on a 9-month salary, typically, not always, but typically the university is paying your salary. So there's like many things to consider. But ultimately, there's nothing wrong with wanting, a decent salary, but you shouldn't be driven in terms of what you're going to do for your career based on your salary, in my opinion. If I was salary based, I might be in industry still, for example. I think you really have to figure out what your passions are and then figure out how you can optimize, your passion in your field. And then what is the salary that we're dealing with? How can I optimize that for me and to take care of my family and those kinds of things? But yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. So when you're thinking about salary.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that. That's really important. And also for them, networking, informational interviews, asking, right, and making decisions. Also taking into account their finances and where they are in life and what they want to do, but definitely having the passion because this is not an easy field. And in terms of opportunities for career growth and advancement, do you have any insights on that?
I'll go since I'm sitting in one right now. I'm a Jefferson Science Fellow, which is this fellowship awarded to faculty so that they can function as scientists that work on policy issues, but in the name of the U.S. government, right? So I always take advantage of these kind of co-curricular activities to see, is this something I might like? How can I teach more people about this, my students, other faculty, staff, etc. So there's still professional development opportunities for faculty and, take advantage of those. In the summers, I go into research with the military. So as a scientist, right? So again, take advantage of these professional development kind of opportunities. I also want to mention the ACE fellowship, which is for faculty who are senior faculty that may be interested in being a dean or provost or something in higher administration and academia. Gives you the opportunity to shadow someone who does that. So keep those things in mind.
And I guess I'll just add, I think this sounds like, oh, there's no resources, but seriously, Google is your friend. Like what I mean is there are so many opportunities out there. And I think sometimes we limit ourselves to what we've heard about. I heard about this science policy fellowship. I heard about, this editing fellowship, that kind of thing. But if like, hey, I really want to learn about, people who do science and law, start looking at, I promise you there are programs out there. So start looking and like, don't be afraid to find your own opportunities. So you should take advantage of whatever career development opportunities, professional development opportunities come through your university or other programs. But I just want to mention that sometimes you have to kind of navigate and try to figure it out yourself because the information is out there. We're in this kind of world where where it really is. And I do this a lot myself, finding opportunities for students. I was literally just Googling yesterday because I don't know anything about editing fellowships and I wanted to find some for a student and I found some. So I just encourage you to like broaden your horizons and try to search.
Do the research.
I just wanted to give one more plug for the National Academy's AAAS Fellowship, which is closer to home for graduate students. So if you're about to finish graduate school, AAAS Fellowship, I think they started like you come out, with your PhD. I think they started like 100K or almost 100K. Don't give me some grace if I didn't get the number right, but they're also hoping to put you all in a job within the U.S. government through the fellowship. So keep that in mind. And it's a 2-year fellowship.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And the links are in the chat of a lot of the things that you have mentioned. Any last comments, Georgia and Swarna? We have about 5 minutes and I only have one more question. And I think I like this question. from one of the trainees. If you could return to your younger self, what advice would you tell them? And would you have chosen the same pathway or the same career path? And with that one, we'll end this panel.
I guess so I would absolutely have chosen the same career path. I don't know if I'll stay in this career, the future, because what I would tell myself and what I tell myself now is just enjoy the ride. No, but seriously, like, I think in general, if you're in higher education, if you're an undergrad, if you're a graduate student, if you're a postdoc, there are so many opportunities available to you that aren't necessarily available to everybody. I mean, I grew up in an extremely poor, underprivileged neighborhood. And so for me to be in these environments, I was like, wow, there's so many opportunities. And, sometimes I took a left turn and I found out that that wasn't the right path for me and came back. Like you said, there's sort of unlimited time, but allow yourself to just experience the journey. And I think most people end up, in all honesty, where they're meant to end up. Like you might have a couple places where you're like, this is not right for me, but then you navigate and you get to the right place. I think most of the people that I've talked to who are really senior are generally pretty happy with where they've come out. And that's basically, listening to themselves along the journey. And then the last thing I'll say before I end is there are so many questions in the chat that I couldn't answer and that I know some of us couldn't answer, but I am always available to all of you people who are on this webinar. You can reach out to me. You can find my information online. I would be happy to answer your questions later if necessary. So thank you.
Thank you. The plug there for reaching out for networking connections.
I think if you're interested in a teaching career at a community college, I think I might have told my younger self, get more teaching experience sooner. I mean, I think things ended up working out for me, to end up in the career, which I do think I would have picked this one. I didn't, back then in graduate school, I didn't quite see it, but I'm very happy with it now. But yeah, just trying to get a little more teaching opportunity if I can, or if I could have, or, someone starting out, definitely, if you can, think about trying to make a connection in terms of getting on as an adjunct professor at a school. And whether that's going to be the school you eventually want to work at or teach at, just having the class under your belt is going to really help. Like the fact that you have actually run a class as opposed to just a few lectures and stuff will be helpful. And then trying to get a little bit of having that little bit of pedagogy training from the Preparing Future Faculty class. That was not one that I was foreseeing. I thought I knew how to teach before that class. So it was really eye-opening to get into some of that stuff like Bloom's taxonomy and things like that. It'll make you more appealing for a teaching position.
Thank you. Got about 3 minutes for Tiffany and Swarna.
I would just say that I would tell my younger self that, you are the gift, right? I've just been through so much in the name of science and in being a scientist where I feel like if I could change certain things about myself or just act in a certain way, that it would be easier for me to navigate the space. And I fought that. And I was mad at myself that I wouldn't change, right? But don't do that. You are the gift. You as who you are, show up as who you are and be okay with that. There is grace and space for everybody, including you. So
Thank you. I love that. You are a gift. Swarna.
I would definitely end up in the same place. I don't think I would be anywhere else. I guess the only thing I would tell my younger self is that things are not going to work out to plan, but it's okay. It eventually all works out. Like whatever you're planning, it's not going to work out, but it still ends well, or not ends, but you still end up in a good place.
Thank you. Thank you all for your valuable insights, for being vulnerable, right? And sharing your experiences and your journey with us. Laura, do you have any announcements, updates?
I wanted to thank the panelists for all the wonderful insights that you shared. This has been fantastic. I also, because you all talked about networking and some of the challenges of networking and how it doesn't always feel great to do it, I wanted to share that our 3:45 talk today, this afternoon, is going to be on making networking approachable. Really kind of digging into, yes, how do you network, but also like, how do you make yourself want to do it? How do you make it a little more comfortable? So keep that in mind for 3:45 today. Thank you all so much. And thank you to everybody who's here. We appreciate you. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.